Andrew Berends is part of this family since its very beginning. We started. Anyone got Valium? We started this series in 2005. It was called Stranger Than Fiction. We just changed the name to Pure Nonfiction this year. And in the second season in 2006, I curated a session of filmmakers talking about their work in Iraq, and that was the first time that Andrew presented his work on this stage. I forget exactly, but I think he was showing some of When Adnan Comes Home that night, and he became a regular in the audience, and it's great tonight to see some of the people who used to come regularly in those years before life moved on and other responsibilities took over, and you can't just spend every Tuesday night hanging out at IFC Center and going drinking later. But it was a nice ride while it lasted. Andrew has been back on this stage for the premiere of Delta Boys, and we showed his film Medina's Dream. I did pull out this slide because when we did the screening of Delta Boys, I didn't know Andrew owned a suit. So it was a hot summer night like tonight, and I thought, well, I'll just be a little bit more casual than I usually am, and who knew? Andrew had a suit, and he wore it that night. So I want to give you an idea of what we're going to do tonight. We have several of Andrew's friends and collaborators who are going to be on stage. We have 5 different clip packages to share with you. They range between 5 and 10 minutes long. And then in between those clips, we'll have people on stage who worked with Andrew to talk about different aspects of his work in the films he made in Iraq, the films he made in Africa, his collaborations as a cinematographer with filmmakers like Vasarhelyi and Isabella Alexander, who you'll both see on stage tonight. The MC for a lot of these sessions is going to be Andrew's longtime friend Mike Liss. You'll meet him shortly. At the end of our formal proceedings, which are meant to last about 95 minutes or so, we will have an opportunity for anyone who wants to come up and share their own short memories of Andrew. So if you've got them, spend the next 90 minutes composing your thoughts for that part. And then afterwards, we will keep up the tradition of going out and having a drink afterwards. Yes, the applause. Yeah, that will happen over at the appropriately named Three Sheets Saloon, which is right across the street next to McDonald's. The upstairs is kind of set aside for us. The good people at the Fulbright Foundation have bought us some food, and there'll be a cash bar. So I think that's the main housekeeping that I want to do. So we're going to kick this off. I've got a 3-minute clip of just kind of setting the scene for some of Andrew's filmmaking and cinematography. And when I was watching this earlier, I kind of recognized that, one thing that really characterized Andrew's filmmaking to me is the sensation of watching it and thinking, what the hell are you doing there? So if we can bring the lights down in the booth, we will watch that clip.
Say something, I'm giving up on. I'll be the one if you want me to. Anywhere I would have followed you. Say something, is over my head. I know nothing at all. And I will stumble and fall. I'm still learning to love, just starting to crawl. Say something, I'm giving up on you. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to you. Anywhere I would have followed you. Say something, I'm giving up on you. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to you. And anywhere I would have followed you. Say something, I'm giving up on you. Say something, I'm giving up on you. Say something.
Hi. And Mike Liss, a friend of Andy's. That was Andy's reel that he put together a couple years ago. And when thinking about how powerful that was going to be to start tonight, I didn't think about the fact that I had to be the guy to get up and actually follow it. But want to thank you all for coming on behalf of the other friends of Andy's who put together tonight. And really want to thank Thom for hosting us tonight. He spoke about Andy's connection to this place, and many of us saw Andy present his own work in this theater and how important this was to him as a filmmaker, as a community member of that filmmaking scene. And there was no place that could have been more appropriate for tonight. In watching that reel after he passed, the things that really stood out to me were the last two scenes in it. In one, he's following these militants walking down the street. And then all of a sudden, this girl darts into the shot. And the camera just instantly follows her. And Andy leaves the scene that he was filming. And he follows her around the corner into the chaos, this barefoot girl running down the street. And then in that very last shot, where you see the militants marching in the background, in the midground, he just stays with that little girl sitting in the field while they go. And that intimacy and that humanism to me was really the essence of his filmmaking, and something that I think we're going to be hearing more about tonight as we go through the program. So what we're going to do now is we are going to watch a clip from one of his 2 Iraq films, Blood of My Brother, that's about 4 minutes long. And then we're going to talk to some people that worked on that. And so we can lower the house lights. And this is a scene from Blood of My Brother.
يلا ما يصير والله ما يصير والله الله يسلم عليك يا معلم يستر عليك يلا قولي في مال لا يلا قولي يا الله
سأله أقول له رب العالمين، أقول له ليش أخذت مني؟ هل غير يحبه؟ لما الله يحبه ما ياخذ. بعدين يعني هو التشييع ماله أنا كنت أتفخر به، يعني 7000 نفر مو قليلة، يعني فقدت الوعي حيل. وأقول أنا أمشي أقول لهم وين راعي بالعالم؟ ليش أقول لهم؟ ما أقول شيء. كل إنسان يتمنى موته وكل إنسان يتمنى تشييع. وراح بعد شو أقول؟ شو قلت لهم، قالوا لي ما يخالف وما ادري شلون، ففتحوا لي الكيس من شفته كأي اخ يعني، فنويت يعني شيت وياه، اندفن وياه، نويت موته يعني. راح دمه شرف، شهيد بطل، راح بطل. تعرف شنو بطل؟ هو الوحيد اللي كانوا اثنين. وين انت شي؟ دحت بالشارع، صرت ابن شارع مو ابن بيت.
I have not fired a bullet since I've been in theater except at a range. You end up not pulling the trigger at your own risk. If you're in a Humvee and a guy's got an RPG and he's aiming it at you and you pull triggers and it kills 3 innocent people that are standing around him, then did you do the right thing? What would you do? What would you do, civilian? What would you do? We have to shoot that guy. We have to, bottom line is we're still people. We still deserve the right to live. If that guy's aiming a weapon that can kill me, I'm going to kill him. That's what I do.
حسب برامر حسب طلع غلطان بحسابه وعدنا اهل المدينه ما هابوا الدبابه وبحسابه غلطان برامر بحسابه غلطان برامر بحسابه غلطان برامر.
خليجي بالدرع خليه يجيبه
صنع عمليات
انا على ابوهم يا ابو امريكا.
I'm Aaron Soffin. I met Andy, I guess probably a year and a half after he got back from this trip, and he had the footage for his 2 Iraq films. And we met online. He was looking for an editor and had no money. And I had just graduated from college, and no good reason why anybody would hire me to edit anything. That's how we came together. And I feel very blessed that he accepted me into this because. Well, there was really no reason why a 22-year-old had any business editing something this good. So I'm eternally thankful to him for that.
Hi, my name is Philip Robertson. I was a war correspondent in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. I worked for a lot of different news organizations, but my work from Iraq actually was done right next to Andy. So a bunch of those shots I was present for. And I can speak about what it was like to be there with him in Baghdad. We all lived in the same hotel. This what I would call weirdly like a war Chelsea. It was a weird kind of agglomeration of stringers and people from all over the world who filled up this hotel. They were all independent journalists, and Andy showed up one day, and I remember very clearly meeting him. I remember the exact microsecond I met him. And he was just he just showed up, he had this kind of magnetism. I was like, hey man, what's going on in Najaf? And he's like, I just got here. I don't know anything. And it was great. We We became very close after that. But yeah, I think it's hard. You're speaking about somebody and their work and what their work means. Really, the man is a brother to you. Yeah. So I think what I wanted to tell you is that Andy had this amazing sense of people. He was very gentle, and he was able to do this thing. It actually only revealed itself over the space of years. He's incredibly vulnerable. He was incredibly vulnerable, and he was incredibly open. And he used this to participate in the lives of his subjects. And to do that in an observational documentary form in the middle of a war while you're being shot at and you're embedded among the insurgents, which made Andy a target of the Americans. When Andy got into that car with the men with the RPGs and the Kalashnikovs, Andy became the target of the United States. So he was able to drop himself inside the flow of history. And he did it with a kind of like a diver, he was very graceful. But he was incredibly whimsical and very funny, and he disarmed people that way. I think that's what I would say. I have one more thing. Can I continue? Is that all right? Okay. Here's what I wanted to say. Andy was a champion sender of inappropriate messages. He could send the absolute just horrible. You wouldn't even want anybody to see it. God forbid you're married, and somebody else would see that, And he sent so many over so many years that Google actually started sending me ads for gay dating sites, which continue. And I had to explain that to my wife, and it was odd, and he was like that. He was the brother I never had. When we met that day in that hotel with James Longley and Micah Guerin and Marie Helene, and it was just, we didn't know it. We knew it and didn't know it, the way you would be part of something that you would just sort of feel instinctually. That hotel, and Andy was the star among them, created an alternate history of the war in Iraq that was not polluted by propaganda. And I think if I could just say this, we all know we're all here for this one reason, and the reason is not totally clear. We've entered a world where weaponized propaganda has been constructed explicitly to murder other people. Billionaires are profiting from this. We know this. This is not news to anyone. This is the world we live in. This is sort of the environment that we exist in. People are falling every day prey to the propaganda. The propaganda precedes the weapons. It precedes the loading of the weapons. It precedes the shipping of the Humvees to the occupied, zones. It precedes, the insurgents rising up as they did that one summer in Baghdad. The propaganda has to exist first. And one way of looking at Andy's work is that Andy is the answer to that. He is the rebuke to the lie. When people adopt lies to prove their loyalty to power, the films that Andy makes are true documents. They are true. Andy was not a millionaire. He risked everything. He risked his life, that's obvious, but he also risked his financial security, and he came back and he worked other jobs to pay for these movies. He got grants. He won fair and square. He did amazing things. But I just wanted to say that the one image that's sort of sticking with me, the allegorical image I wanted to present was this. In 1989, a man stepped in front of a tank. Holding a bag of groceries. He stopped that tank. The tank was really, for me, it was lies. It was the force of lies directed against a civilian population that was essentially innocent. And I see Andy's work in that frame. I see it that way because there is no other way to counteract this weaponized, this lethal media environment that we're entering. And Andy is not alone. And when we discuss the meaning of his work, there's this crazy metaphysics, right? There's the work itself, which is amazing, right? Which I got to see made. We were standing next to each other at this moment. But what I didn't understand at the time, when I fully understand now, is the degree to which it sends a signal of a kind of bravery and an ability to make work in conditions that are almost impossible. The physical trials of Andy were significant, like the heat, the 120-degree heat, the sickness, the danger itself. It's like there's a toll on his body. There was a toll on his body, on our bodies, really, to do this work. But that's what I wanted to present to you, that the secret reason that everyone is somehow magically, accidentally in this room tonight is this, that there is a way to make this work, and there is a way to do something that people will often say is impossible. They say, you can't save lives. You can't do it. It's too big. You can't stop a war. You can't stand in front of a tank. But it is, in fact, false. That's a lie. I think Andy proves that. I think his work for me proves that. And I witnessed it. I witnessed his ability to throw himself deeply into these situations. He could move like the wind. He was a big guy. He was tall. He was also very strong, and he could hold the camera level and rush directly into a scene. He wouldn't hang back. Andy's technique was to launch himself directly into something. I always found that incredibly valuable. But yes, I mean, this time in Iraq, for me, it was really my start as working as a journalist, and lots of us began at that time. And when I see him and his films, how they've evolved, and the signal they send to us now, I'm awash with gratitude and joy.
And Aaron, when he came back from that trip in 2003, 2 films resulted of it. When he came back, how much did he know what those 2 films were, that they were 2 separate films? What was the process of putting those together?
He had a very clear picture, because to a certain extent, the second one, When Adnan Comes Home, was the way he described it to me was it was like the bonus story for him. He wanted to bring home a sense of what the war was in as wide a way as he could. And I remember he used to say at film festival Q&As that he decided to go to Iraq at a mall during Christmas time. And because Philip's nodding, I know it must be true. And the thought he had to himself was, this is what it looks like when we as a country go to war. It looks like Christmas. There's no change in our daily lives. And he wanted people to understand better, and I think for himself to understand better what was really happening there. And Blood of My Brother, I think, was the attempt to do that. And I think there was, you can kind of confirm or deny this, Philip, but I think there was a lot of extra time, and he wanted to find more stories. And so When Adnan Comes Home was born out of the second story, and it is much narrower and powerful in its own kind of personal way. But he was very clear from the beginning that they were 2 films, and where the line was. Even though in this one there are a lot of pieces that are not narratively connected to anything else. They're just kind of a portrait of the place and of the war at that point in time, and that was really what he wanted to do.
And then, as an editor, how was it to marry those 2 things, sort of the overall picture and ambiance versus keeping the narrative thread throughout it?
The first day I met him, he showed me 15 minutes that he'd cut, which absolutely blew me away. And kind of what I alluded to earlier, that I wasn't really sure why I would have the privilege of working on this. And he was paying me so little money that my friends and family would say, you can't do this. Like, you have rent, you can't afford to do this. And I would say, you don't know how good this is. Like, this is not a waste of time. This is going to be, there are only going to be a handful of films that come out of the war in this period, and this is going to be one of them. And it's not just that it's unique, it's doing something nothing else is doing. But on that first day, I started an argument with him that I would have for the entirety of the edit, which is whether or not to include the Americans in the film. And I cut the piece, just pulled out the pieces that we saw today, and I included that bit of the Americans specifically as a way to say to him that he was right, and that it took me a long time to realize that. But I think that what he wanted to do was really give as much of the scene as he could, and that just focusing on the story of Ibrahim, the young boy who we meet earlier, was not enough to make the impact he wanted to make. That he wanted to demonstrate that it's more complicated than that, and that there's a lot going on, that the soldiers are a young boy who have lost friends and family just like Ibrahim, and they're struggling with this in their own way, and that it's just really complicated and really brutal. And that if we're going to walk through the mall and understand that, we need to kind of bring that brutality into our consciousness in some way. And I think that's what he accomplishes in the film. And having that guide was a pretty strong direction to put something together.
And Phil, we have about 60 seconds if you want to give any final thought or observation.
Oh, well, Andy would do things like this. He would see the techniques he used in the war to get access to subjects. He was not above using those techniques in the United States to get access to my family. So he would show up. Oh wait, but actually that's not the story I wanted to tell. But it's a similar story. Once Andy went to I think it was Adnan's house. It was the family he was shooting at that time, and of course you're in a Muslim home, and one takes off one's shoes, and you're respectful, and so he does that, and then one of the little kids comes to him and just says, "Andy, we're going to take your socks. They're just horrible. They need to be washed," and so they're doing his laundry. And that's kind of how the magic happens. I mean, one year he brought Christmas to my house. He just showed up with presents. He was an uncle to my daughter. But yeah, that's that vulnerability that exists. That's real, and that was a current that I'll never forget.
Thank you guys both so much. So we're going to transition now to clips from the two films that he directed himself while he was in Africa, Delta Boys and Medina's Dream. And this will run for about 8 minutes, and then we'll have another discussion.
For the past few years, a battle has raged at the mouth of the Niger River, pitting local militants against government forces and multinational oil companies. When I first arrived here, I had just a basic understanding of the nature of the conflict. Nigeria is the 5th largest supplier of oil to the United States. It is the 8th largest exporter of oil on the planet, but in the Niger Delta, the region that produces hundreds of millions of dollars in oil and gas each year, the average person lives on less than $1 per day. There are no good schools, no good roads, no good hospitals. Every year, over 300 oil spills contaminate the region, and constant flaring of precious natural gas pollutes the ecosystem. While oil companies and corrupt politicians reap enormous profits, the inhabitants of the Niger Delta live in poverty. Under these circumstances, it was no surprise to me that a conflict had ignited in which militants blow up pipelines, sabotage flow stations, and kidnap foreign oil workers.
We are telling all oil expatriates to leave Nigeria, not only the Niger Delta. Leave Nigeria, we will take lives, we will destroy lives, we will crumble the economy mercilessly.
The truth is, I always tend to root for the underdog, and I felt an attraction to these men who were taking on the world's largest oil corporations and the corrupt government of Africa's most populous nation. So I took my camera to Nigeria to try to meet them.
Wait there! Tight up yourself! Keep everywhere easy! Keep it tight up your level! Every soldier according to his swing! Art. Who goes you in this our Delta region? White man? You come with our chief of staff?
Yes, sir.
Our chief of staff, you, your brother?
Yes, sir.
You white man, brother to black man?
Yes, sir.
You come here for the Niger Delta?
Yes, sir.
Your brother to Niger Delta?
Yes, sir.
Feel free.
Thank you.
Say only what you see. Don't add or subtract.
Is there a school you go to here or no?
Here?
Yeah.
There is no good school. We just take one lesson per day.
And how old are you?
Yes, how old are you? I have 15 years.
So,
Okay.
I just filmed them like doing their... So is it okay for us to stay here now?
Do you want to talk to them anymore? Or we need to cooperate?
I just want to film the natural life.
You guys, man, I see you in like anybody. Talada is spoke at the barrier. Like in the Bayirai. Yalla Taban. Your name?
Huh?
You're asking.
My name?
Yes.
Andy.
Andy.
Yes.
Andy. Andy. Andy who?
Andy Berends.
Berends.
Yes. I'm from New York. I'm American.
New York.
New York is a very big city. We have buildings in New York that are 100 floors tall. Very, very high buildings. I want to see this game that they're playing.
Most of that footage we just saw from Medina is actually from the raw footage. Only a bit of that was in the final film. And when Mike Pilgrim was pulling the clips for tonight and he saw that and he said, "Oh, this is Andy 101." And you really do see how he would get that intimacy with that audience. You hear him saying, "I just want to film their natural life." And you see how he's really connecting with these people in these villages so far from his world and his reality. And that's really the basis of so much of the intimacy of his film work. And along the same lines for Delta Boys, in the photo that Thom showed of Thom interviewing Andy, I actually was just watching clips from that interview earlier tonight. And Thom was asking him about how he got into the camps and why and what that was about for him. And he said how it was so much of it was for him was just the process of just hanging out, sharing the same conditions as them. Then he went on to say it's really uncomfortable. But that was such the basis of his intimacy and how I think the humanism really came through. And with that, I am going to bring back up Aaron. We're going to bring up Chai and Isabella, and we're going to talk a little bit about Andy's work in Africa on his own films. If y'all wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves, please.
Hi, my name is Isabella Alexander, and since you all were giving a little intro on how you met Andy, I'll tell you that story as well. I first met him in 2016. I was a year into working on a documentary film about the African migrant and refugee crisis. I'd been filming across Central and West Africa on people's journeys up through North Africa in hopes of crossing the Mediterranean. And I had also just gotten out of a long prison sentence in Algeria. And a friend of mine said, "There's this guy you've got to meet if you're going to go back to finish this shoot, because if anyone can give you advice on how to get out your next, how to get back on your next shoot with footage in hand, it is Andrew Berends." And so we had a phone call, which turned into him telling me he wanted to come back and finish the film with me. And he ended up shooting with me over the course of 3 years across 12 different countries on some of the most incredible and also difficult film shoots that I've ever been on. So.
My name is Chai Vasarhelyi. I met Andy. So I'm a documentary director, and I met Andy, I think in 2007 after I saw Blood of My Brother. And I was just really moved by the film, and a friend of mine from high school was doing some work for him, and we were both at IDFA. And she introduced us, and we kind of hit it off immediately. Subsequently, it's just like all these memories are coming back. It's interesting. And also it's really, I think I feel like Andy was mine. Like Andy and I went on to shoot, he shot 2 full films with me. He also worked on Free Solo most recently. And we spent so much time together in Africa, and in Texas and in Kosovo, and just months. This was before I had kids. This was a different lifetime ago where we'd just make these films together. But it really strikes me how we all kind of shared that. And but Andy and I, he began working on this film with me called Little Troopers. It was never released. And it was about several military families in Texas. And we had shot maybe, about 5 weeks, and I got into a really bad car accident in New York. A taxi I was in lost control and hit a building. So everyone wear your seatbelts. And I broke, I fractured my back in 6 places. It was not good. But we had already made this commitment to these families. So Andy said, just let me go. So he worked on that for months for me. And it took, I was like out of commission for about 6 months. And then anyway, we went on to work on Incorruptible together. But, really just watching these clips reminds me of 2 of my favorite scenes from these 2 films, one of which never made it into the film. And also I remember that voiceover and sitting next to him on the Avid as he was working on that voiceover. And I was like, the voiceover is horrible. And reworking those words, but he had to have the voiceover, but it was really, really bad. And he was just like so bad at being able to deliver that. Like it was like you at your most like self-conscious. But there's a scene that never made in the film where these kids are chasing these iguanas. Like they're actually like hunting iguanas, and hunting iguanas is hard. And they're like scampering up trees, and the scene goes on. And I feel like I saw a cut where there's a 15-minute iguana scene. But the point is, which I think you see in what we just watched, is like Andy really enjoyed himself while he was doing this. He didn't speak down to people. He was entirely present the way those kids are present in that moment. And I think that's what made all of us, it's what drew subjects into his stories. It's what drew other filmmakers into his circle. It's what I enjoyed most about working next to him, was that he just enjoyed those moments and he loved the work. And then there was also the side of him that loved the excellence of the work, which was, was both a blessing and a curse for him. Because there was no person I know that was harder on himself and pushed himself harder than Andy, and also pushed those around him pretty hard. But it made you feel both safe next to him in these horrible situations. Like, the parts of his reel where they're like demonstrators, like the joke was, so he shot that with me, this would start happening and I would run like back and he would run forwards. And then I would turn around and be like, wait, that's our only camera, Andy. And like start running, chasing him into it. And then he would yell at me to get back. It was this like constant like comedy show between the 2 of us. But just he enjoyed so much what he did, and he brought such great compassion and empathy to it. I've got funny stories, but I'll save that.
And then Aaron, you did some editing on Delta Boys as well. He got arrested in Nigeria. His trip was cut short. He came back, and I remember for a few years he wasn't really sure that he had a film or what that film was. What was that process working with him and really finding it?
Well, Chai alluded to a little bit of it in terms of working on the voiceover. I worked on it for probably 3 months, and we cut together all of the verite footage and then stepped back and said that it doesn't make any sense. What should we do? And it was clear that we needed somebody's voice, and he didn't want it to be his. And eventually we just paused because he really struggled with that. In terms of, I think if you watch his films, everything he does, he removes himself from the frame as much as possible. This is about the people in front of the camera. And that was really difficult. I've rewatched most of his films in the last 2 weeks. And one of the things that I learned seeing them back to back, I always, as an editor, am looking for the through line, for the story. I'm trying to find the narrative. Where does the character pop up again? And I kind of realized something different is going on. And even as I was trying to pull that out of it, that the magic of his films is that the character is first and foremost the place every single time. That what he does is through all of these different stories of different people that are both totally unconnected and completely connected at the same time, give you a sense of what it's like to live in these places, be it Baghdad at the beginning of the war, be it in the Niger Delta when your water is polluted, or in South Sudan or across the border, during the fighting there. And it's a challenge as an editor to deal with that, but it seems to me that it comes through loud and clear in his work. What it was like to be in these places. I think that's what he was trying to do, and I think he really accomplished that very strongly.
And as much as he kept himself out of the frame, the intimate relationship and the trust that he was able to build came through so clearly. Isabella, before we were talking a bit about kind of the way you saw Andy as the humanist behind the camera, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'm actually a cultural anthropologist by training, and so I first knew about Andy's work because I used his films in my classes where I teach. And I think the beauty of them is exactly that, and I think it's what drove so much of his own work in Africa was in trying to humanize what have become these really complex political issues. And he knew that in order to do that, you had to draw the lens in close, that you can't get an audience to care about a massive population. The challenge isn't getting them to care about one person. And I think for Andy, the way to do that was, it was this push to move people from sympathy to empathy, right? To see a piece of themselves in the character, to see someone they know in that character, to make that character their brother or their mother or their neighbor. And he did that beautifully. I got to see how he developed the relationships behind the camera that enabled him to create these films that give audiences the sense that they are in those spaces, like you said, Aaron.
There's a scene in Blood of My Brother of a massive rally. There are probably 10,000 people in this square in Baghdad. And I remember in cutting it, it was at a point in the movie where we were trying to build up drama and give a sense of the escalation of things. And he was just smack in the middle of these 10,000 screaming people. And it looks unlike any other footage of that kind of event, because usually you've got a cameraman who's afraid, who's on the outside, he's all the way zoomed in, and the camera's shaky. And we were looking through the footage, and I said, this seems staged, because it should be so scary. And it's not, because you're right next to all of these people, and you're capturing that. And it's a bit of an example by exception, because what we ended up doing is something he almost never wanted to do, which is include all the shake and the zooms to add a little bit of drama. But the way that he filmed was present throughout, of just getting up close, staying wide, and letting the people live their lives in front of him, in front of his camera.
And Chai, do you want to wrap on a funny story that you had promised, or is that putting you two on the spot?
I mean, I don't need this story like pop. It's so not like character insightful about Andy, but it is funny. So we were, while making Incorruptible, which was about the 2012 elections in Senegal, where the president tried to change the constitution to allow for a third term, and it got quite violent. Andy and I spent a lot of time with the sitting president, as well as his main adversary. And this is the president of an African nation who's like 85 years old, and it was at this meeting. It was at this meeting with like the big religious leaders who are all marabouts, or like, high members of Sufi brotherhoods. And we had gotten in, and it was kind of a big deal that we were in this like special meeting where essentially one is giving cash to the other for their votes. Like literally giving, like, their cars are pulled up outside giving cash. And there's this table, they're all sitting there, and we're like, oh, and Andy was like, was double my size, like easily double my size. So I'm sitting there, like kind of crouched on this little table. And then Andy, in getting his shot, slowly begins to sit down next to me. He sits down next to me, and the glass table shatters. I am pitched on the floor. I think we both had like pretty bad like cuts, and the whole scene ended up being about us. But it was just, just even the way, like I just see his face, like that smile, and how he laughed. And again, like it was just, he was mortified, but it was funny. Like, and it was that we were always laughing about like I don't know, how crazy life was, how bizarre these moments are that one finds himself in, how difficult it was what we were seeing, but still Andy brought joy to what he was filming at every moment. Wasn't always that ridiculous, but yeah, I'm happy I got that memory back when you were speaking, I think. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And now we're actually going to transition to seeing clips from your film.
No, but I believe I've heard that he actually is Jewish. I just can't remember.
Trevor, just put it down. Drop it down to the side. Bremen, scoot in. Bremen, scoot in. Hold up your thing high.
So am I.
Il est arrivé qu'il était tellement populaire à la Hicham. Il jouait au football. Il aimait chanter comme ça. Il aimait chaque vendredi, on était dans la mosquée. On salmodiait le nom de Dieu. Allah, Allah, la ilaha illallah. Pendant ces 4 dernières années, il a vécu avec moi en tant qu'enseignant et marabout. J'ai commencé à l'encadrer. Wallahi, je le jure devant Dieu, j'ai remis une pièce de 500 francs à El Hadjiam pour lui dire qu'il faut acheter 2 miches de pain. Donc je ne l'ai pas revu.
Allahu Akbar!
Je ne l'ai pas revu. On m'appelle pour me dire que El Hadjiam a été tué lors des manifestations.
Allahu Akbar!
Je vais le voir.
Allahu Akbar!
Toutes les routes étaient barrées par des feux. C'était difficile. J'arrive, il me dit il faut sortir. Je sors pourquoi? On vient de tuer mon enfant, on me dit de sortir.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Et quand il a montré son visage, je ne pouvais pas me retenir. J'ai vu que la balle a pénétré. Et c'était un trou tellement profond. Et son image me revient chaque jour. Le premier certificat qu'avait établi le médecin, il avait mis décès naturel. Ñu dóor ko balu fital defuñu grenade defuñu leneen loolu balu fital. Jamais je n'aurais dû imaginer qu'en partant à la pâtisserie pour payer ce pain, il allait être tué. Jamais. Il allait être assassiné. C'est trop méchant pour ces enfants-là qu'on lui fasse ça et que je n'arrive pas à me maîtriser.
And aiming towards the most beautiful valley on earth. I remember coming to Yosemite as a little kid, and my dad would always have a little cooler in the back of the car and have our cookies and the cold milk, and we'd sit on these slabs above Tunnel View, which is like the most epic view of Yosemite. Mostly. I used to be like a super picky eater. When I was like 19 or 20 or, well, between like 20 and 24, I basically decided that I had to start eating vegetables and then sort of like systematically introduce myself to vegetables, like one at a time, which worked pretty well. I pretty much eat anything. I started eating meat maybe 3 or 4 years ago, mostly for environmental reasons. Then once I stopped, I also kind of got into the ethics of it a little bit more. Let's see how this comes out. You know, I mean, there are plenty of folks who'd probably think this is like terrible. I'm eating like canned chili and eggs. I've outdone myself. Spicy chili really had something.
Baba, il n'y a rien ici.
Ils sont surveillés. Oui. Adem, il m'a téléphoné. Il y a des étrangers, ils viennent, ils ont pris l'appareil chez vous et surveillé.
Je me souviens de tout.
Ne mana kelela, ne mana woyola, ni nana bendela, anga ben, no anti ben, ya fanema sabula kelema.
On a préparé des sauves pour aller en Europe. On a voyagé longtemps. Et monté sur le gros camion. Parfois, on a caché à l'arrière le petit camion. Quand on est arrivé au Maroc, on a dormi dans les forêts.
While the world's attention has been focused on Syrian refugees, 20 African people die every day trying to reach Europe. Over the last 3 years, I've been beaten and jailed by authorities, trying to stop me from filming families as they risk everything to escape hunger and violence.
You have to move tonight.
Lights out!
Le désert, c'est vraiment, c'est l'enfer. Moi, je vis des squelettes comme ça des gens. Je n'ai dit à personne.
All the people that here you are seeing in the forest, we are having the same intention.
On brûle nos papiers, on se sacrifie, aller juste rentrer en Europe.
Il est gravement malade, ça n'allait plus. On est reparti dans le même hôpital, mais on ne lui dit rien. Quand il va là-bas, on lui donne, il a commencé à partir un peu.
For every migrant who makes it to Europe, 49 others die trying.
Nuestras misiones es como para evitar que puedan entrar saltando la valla.
L'Espagne et l'Union européenne financent l'expulsion des migrants.
Passionné, il est mort, on lui jette quelque part en forêt. Personne ne sait.
Il te frappe et des fois il casse des pieds des gens, il casse des bras.
Toutes les organisations des droits de l'homme crient que c'est illégal. C'est illégal. Qui va les écouter?
For these families, hope for the future is greater than fear of the present. It's time for their stories to be told.
Si Dieu fait que tu vas mourir dans l'eau, tu vas mourir. Mais que Dieu te dit.
So, Isabella, the work that we just saw in the last clip from the burning, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is still in post-production right now. It's you're finishing up that film.
Yeah, I shot it over the course of 3 years, about 18 months in total on the ground. And the last shoot was with Andy last summer, and had a bit of a longer phase than I expected, raising money for post. And we just hired a lead editor, so I'm strangely in the editing room with Andy's voice, seeing the world unfold through the lens of his camera just about every day now.
And can I ask you, I want to ask you both this, the time that you spent with Andy in Africa, clearly he spent a lot of years there. It's not easy filmmaking. It's not easy life to be there. And I wonder if you can, give some sense of what you think kept him returning there.
I mean, I think that Andy loved the stories. I think that he loved what it felt like when you were telling these types of stories that were so underrepresented. And I also think that there was real joy in the work. And, you know, I don't know, I keep on kind of coming back to these thoughts about how, you know, when you were in the field with Andy, it was like being, like you guys were one in some way. You know, like often there's like a dynamic between a cinematographer and a director where the director's pushing, or like, you know, you're always trying to manage one another. And there was a fluency, at least when I worked with Andy, about like he wanted it as badly as I did, you know, and that the shot, and like, you know, I don't know if these clips necessarily do justice to just how exquisite the work was, because the work was exquisite. You know, he paid the attention to detail, the humanity in every shot, like the shot you were talking about earlier, which is from Incorruptible, where the girl runs out of the building and Andy chooses to go towards the girl. And that wasn't my directing, you know, that was where Andy was compelled. And of course, it's where I wanted him to go. So I think there was a drive, and I think he also loved Africa, and he loved the way it felt. I can say something really off color. I think he liked the women too. Like there was a certain part about like the life there that he enjoyed. He loved the music. And he also knew how to enjoy himself when we weren't working there. And that's not a euphemism. It was more that we were present. Like we lived there, we'd go out to dinner, you know, go out dance. It was fun. But I think it was the real humanity and the storytelling and he felt really alive while he was doing it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it was, like you said, that search for these stories that he felt like weren't being told otherwise, and the challenge of telling those. And then there was an adventure to it. He brought so much light and joy into even really difficult filming situations. And I'm pretty sure every shoot with him started with him saying, "God damn it, you're not paying me enough to do this. I'm way too old to be doing this." But he did feel most alive and I think happiest when he was there doing that work. One little anecdote just to show you how much these stories and these characters meant to him. He was in, we had wrapped our shoot in August, and he was working on another short-term project, maybe for Vice, in the fall. And he was in Mali, which is a country we'd done a lot of filming in, not a country that's easy to travel around. He had one free day left before he had to fly back to the US, and he wanted to make a trip to visit Kia and her two kids, who you saw there in my clip, who were some of the main subjects of my film. So he took a day-long bus trip in Mali to get to Buguni in the middle of nowhere, just to spend an evening with this family on a project that he wasn't even working on at the moment. He built real human relationships, and he cared so deeply.
I mean, that was true. He stayed in touch with most of the subjects that we ever filmed. I mean, either via Facebook or he knew more about these kids who'd grown up in Texas than I did at the end of the day. They stayed in touch, and he was always updating me on people's lives, which is, it was Andy.
Chai, we saw a little bit from the film Free Solo, which Andy was not a principal cinematographer on, but was an additional camera person on for that intimate scene in Alex Honnold's small camper van that he lives in. And it's funny to think that you'd hire tall Andy to be in such a small place. But I wonder if you could share any memories from that shoot.
I mean, it comes back. Andy and I were really, really close, and I couldn't imagine making a movie without Andy. And so when we began making Free Solo, Andy was Alex is tricky, and I was like, he's gonna like Andy. Like, Andy's kind of tricky, and when Alex complains about something, Andy can be like, "Well, I was in jail." There's Alex may think he's badass, but Andy's pretty badass. So, Alex Andy actually slept on Alex's floor several times. I think that a few times Sonny was in the van too, and Andy'd be like, no, I think I should sleep there to really get the shot in the morning. And I'm like, okay. I think Andy also got Alex really sick once. That was not a great thing when they both came down with a horrible flu that Andy brought in. No, I mean, it was, the intimacy, the intimacy and humor of that scene really speaks to Andy's strengths. And that is beautiful. I think he was a shot maker. His shots told a story within themselves, and his instinct was so strong and so human. And that's, I mean, honestly, it's really rare. I work with lots of cinematographers, and it's just, he was a shot maker, and that's hard. I mean, another funny Andy story. So he had, like in typical Andy fashion, like he was getting sick. We were in New York. And he came down with appendicitis. So he brought himself to like basically the closest hospital, which is also probably one of the worst in the tri-state area. And it was this whole thing where he called me and he was like, you've got to come and do your thing. And I'm like, what is that? And I got there and I understood what he meant. Like he was like in this corner bed, like moaning away. And, you know, finally I began screaming, like we got someone there, but in the process, his appendix burst. And so he was there for a while. And then his doctor was Nigerian. There were a bunch of Nigerian doctors. And then Andy would go off starting to talk to him about his work. And I'm like, Andy, you have no idea what side these guys are on. Like, what are you doing? Okay, you're in isolation. These guys are taking care of you. They've got your lives in their hands. And like it was just, I don't know. Again, it was that connection. Like he wanted to connect, and it became buddies.
Isabella, as we close out this portion, I wonder if you can speak to Andy as an image maker, and you know any of the images that he captured for the burning that that reflect his talents there.
Yeah, I think your description of him being so skilled at really not just creating the beautiful images, but building a scene. You know, he was always building scenes, which I'm grateful for right now as I'm editing. I think with this project in particular, there was just there was a diversity of challenges. I mean, we were sometimes in someone's home and he had the ability to really be thoughtful about the scene he was structuring, and then so much of it we were shooting on the go. We were shooting undercover. We were shooting, you know, in a raft that was sinking, like you saw in the final clip. And his ability to stay composed and this fierce determination to tell the story that we were there to tell, that never wavered. And I am 100% sure that I will never find another DP who will bring that to a project.
Okay, now we are going to bring Andy's voice into this room. We have a clip of an interview that he gave. It's about 3 or 4 minutes long. After that, Jason Gardner is going to come up here to talk about the new Andrew Berends Fellowship briefly. And after Jason speaks, we're going to have a microphone on a stand here. And if any of you would like to come share a memory that you have of Andy, I'll just ask you to come over here and you can sit in one of those seats and take your turn, and I'll invite people to stage as they want to do that. So if we bring the lights down, we'll watch this interview clip of Andrew Berends.
I got interested in college, and it was almost like, well, I can't imagine what else I'm going to do, so let me do filmmaking. It's not like when I was 11, I always dreamed of making movies. And then I worked on some independent films in New York, you know, as like a camera assistant or a PA carrying grip equipment around. And then I made my first documentary. I was in Holland. I was filming different things. I was filming stuff with my family. But I have a cousin in Holland who is a fisherman on the North Sea. And I was like, I want to go to sea for a week and just see, you know, like have the experience. And I had my equipment. So I was like, I'm going to film my week at sea with my cousin, the fisherman, who I don't really know, but is like about my age, and it'll be a great experience. Most people wouldn't, for very mentally healthy reasons, wouldn't choose that line of work. And for me, there's good reasons and not so good reasons. You know, in some ways, it's I find it much easier than ordinary life. Not that life here is ordinary, but life in Iraq or like, you know, in conflict zones is simpler in a lot of ways. It's much easier to make decisions. It's much easier to have a reason to get out of bed in the morning because like a car bomb just went off. So for me, coming home from Iraq was actually harder than going there because suddenly I was like, oh, nothing important's happening here. So that's one of the dangerous aspects of it. You know, if I allowed myself to keep going down, I was like, I just want to go back to Baghdad, which I didn't do. I kind of worked through it and, you know, tried to explore, like, you know, relearn that, you know, life here is important and exciting. But I can fall into that. Why? I don't know, like emotional reasons, mental issues, my childhood, like, there's a part of me that, you know, it's an escape. It's a very exciting escape from ordinary life, which is harder. This new film I'm making about the war in the Nuba Mountains in Sudan, I was like almost finished with the film and struggling to put it together, and somebody sent me a couple of quotes which I had put at the beginning of the film, and one is by Thomas Mann, and he says, "War is a cowardly escape from the problems of peace." To some degree, I'm cavalier about it, because that's partly how I'm able to do that kind of work, is, you know, not stay calm and not freak out over little things, and but I do take the work very seriously. Like, I kind of, in some ways it sounds like I fell into it, but I wouldn't do this work if I didn't commit to it and feel like it's important. So there's risks, and sometimes I'll take the risks and try to, you know, just have faith that, I don't like to use the word faith, but hope that if I, you know, I don't get really unlucky and have bad things happen. But so I don't mean to seem cavalier, but I do feel like it's, you know, if at all possible, just stay calm, and it'll be, you know, things are going to be okay.
Hey everyone, I can't see everyone who's here at all, but for those who don't know me, my name is Jason Gardner, and I'm Andy's childhood friend from kindergarten, and there's a lot of his Hastings family here. And I'm one of the founding board members of the Andrew Berends Fellowship, recently formed. So I want to tell you about it for a little bit. So the mission of the fellowship is to really seek out and support these emerging filmmakers from all walks of life who embody Andy's spirit and determination, with a focus on sharing these unheard stories. So it was born directly out of the desire of Andy's family, friends, and documentary film community, his colleagues, to keep his memory alive and active in the world of documentary where he himself thrived. So to note, a significant portion of ticket sales tonight will go to the fellowship, but that's really just a great start. So we hope that you all consider keeping Andy's memory and spirit alive by supporting the fellowship. And there'll be little cards with it's just the website, andrewberends.net, that you can go and find the link to donate. But just, I wanted to say that that we, the four of us at the moment at the board, we don't really consider the fellowship to be about only money. It's not, we don't want people to be applying to say, oh, I just want that money and thank you very much. We envision it to be an ongoing sort of community that we're building. What that means is that really it's about helping emerging filmmakers with their careers. So what does that mean? Besides a little bit of money for expenses, of course, it means connecting them with some experienced documentary filmmakers, perhaps some on this panel, getting discounts on equipment, access to film festivals, and things like that. So we see almost it as a fellow who is awarded will be a mentor, or will be a mentee with experienced mentors and some other things. So if you have any questions or want to get involved, be it as a donor or filmmaker or someone who can connect us with a foundation, etc., please talk to me or the two other board members who are here tonight, who are Aaron Soffin, who you saw on the panel, stand up, and Mike Pilgrim, who's currently behind the camera. Surprise, surprise. You can also obviously go to andrewberends.net and get on the mailing list, and we have a little sign-up form at the desk in the lobby. So to wrap, some quick thank yous. First of all, thanks to everyone for coming. It's amazing to see all these faces here from all walks of his life, both personal and professional. Thanks to Thom Powers, who of the Pure Nonfiction. He immediately, upon hearing of the news, said, yes, 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 let's do this. And so I totally appreciate that. Thank you to Michael Liss for putting together panels. Thank you for all of our panelists. Thanks to Mike Pilgrim, Aaron Soffin, Maria Ibrahimova, Jonathan Goodman-Levitt, Ian Spanier, who filmed that last interview, and Priya Seshan. Most importantly, thank you to Andy's brother, Jan Brovka Berends.
So I do want anyone who comes down. Yeah, I was just thinking of that. I know Isabella had some testimonials, so I'll invite you back up, Isabella, and anyone else who wants to follow her. Just please make your way down here. Yes, great. House lights help.
Okay. I know you've already heard from me, so this isn't from me. I'm going to read to you some words that subjects of the recent film that I worked on with Andy sent and asked that I please share tonight. The first is from Jalu, who is an 18-year-old refugee from Sierra Leone. He said, "Sister, our tears have not stopped flowing since we heard the news. We beg God to grant our brother Andy his forgiveness and welcome him into the eternal peace. We're climbing to the highest mountaintops here, screaming, 'God, have you seen this man? Have you seen all of the great causes he fought for in his life? I'll always remember our times together. I'll always remember the last day we spent together, not knowing it would be our last. You and Andy slept beside me in the forest and shared my meager dinner. My heart cries for this big man who showed me kindness, even in my darkest days. May the world remember him in all of his greatness.'" And the second one that I want to share with you is from Miriam, who is a refugee from Côte d'Ivoire. She said, "I'm shocked and saddened by the heavy loss of one of our friends and an active member of our little community of people fighting the good fight in the name of injustice, of poverty, of war, and of the indifference of our leaders. Andy, every day we have prayed that God gives you a place of choice, close to his kind and humble heart, because we know that your heart is like his. All of us have been touched by you. We love you, and we will never forget you. May you rest in peace. Andy, big man, constant friend of the weak and oppressed, we are blessed to call you our brother."
Thank you, Isabella. We have Doug Block, filmmaker and founder of dword.com. Don't trip, but please welcome Doug.
Thanks, Tom. Wow, I'm still processing my thoughts here because, I knew Andy a little bit, but I know him mostly online. I knew him mostly online. He was one of the earliest members of the D Word. He joined in 2002, and right before I came down, I decided at the last minute to look up how many posts he put up on it. We can count by you just go back, you check and see all posts, and 25 per page. So I spent about 10 minutes adding it all up. 877 posts, and these were not just small posts, they were real shares. I mean, he was such an incredible, invaluable, generous person, sharing, whatever he knew, including his, a lot was said about how vulnerable he was. And he shared a lot of his insecurities and vulnerabilities, which is invaluable to other filmmakers. In person, I kind of saw the producer side of him as opposed to the artist and filmmaker, because we would, meet up at these annual birthday celebrations, or after Stranger Than Fiction screenings, have some drinks, and then all of a sudden it was about how impossible it is to get our films out, and and about the struggle. And as somebody who shoots his own films, I've always wanted to work with a cameraman or camera person. And I just really regret I never had the opportunity to have him shoot on one of my films. He was brilliant, and I'm in awe. So I did want to mention that the D Word hosts have talked among ourselves, and we not only want to make a big contribution to the fellowship, but we want to spearhead a crowdfunding effort from our 17,000 members in 130 countries. And also, I'd love to talk to you guys about how we can not only raise money, but kind of work to build the community. Aaron, you know so well. So let's talk afterwards about that.
Thank you very much, Doug. Please come up and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Thom Lennon, and I like Doug knew Andy much more online than in person, and through the D Word. And then I had a really small job just like 2.5 years ago, and I posted it in classifieds in the D Word, as I often did. And Andy, who I thought of as very high-end, incredibly accomplished cinematographer, just emailed me and said this was a small thing. It was like 3 or 4 days of work, and it was like color correcting. It wasn't a fit. And he emailed me, and in that vulnerability that everybody has said, he just emailed me and said, "Look, Thom, I'm broke, and I need this work, and I'm not a colorist, but I'll do it fine for you." And how could I say no? So, and that's really one of the first times that I met him in person. And in those few days, I felt not just the vulnerability in the positive sense of that sort of human accessibility, but the vulnerability, just plain vulnerability. I really was worried for him. And as we talked and we stayed in touch after that, and I would call him because I really was actually concerned about this life that he led, of which I know very little, but my sense is, always on the road, didn't have a lot of institutional support because by nature you're just out there launching your projects. There isn't anybody telling you to go out to the Delta Niger. And presumably, I don't know much about his family life, but I presume it was fairly, it's not really compatible, that kind of life. And so I started thinking not just about him, but about this community of which we're a part, which is that this business of being an independent filmmaker is very, very, very hard. And I saw others like him, and I have felt that way myself at times, but I felt others who were really, right at the edge of sort of a kind of state of nervous exhaustion. And I think that, and he would say to me, I failed. He said to me, now understand, I didn't know him that well, but he would say, I failed. My work has failed. I have not reached what I wanted. I haven't, the films haven't done what I expected them to do. I have not succeeded. And what you were talking about before, about how tough he could be upon himself. And so I think that as we remember him, let's also remember that this work, which has become more and more stressful as and more lonesome as the technology enables us to work more and more on our own, and then we're also expected to be publicists and self-publicists and building our brands and all of these sort of things that we didn't necessarily define ourselves as, that this is very hard. And as we remember Andy, let's also remember to reach out when those moments of stress come, and that's also a way of honoring his memory. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Thom.
Two filmmakers who were also in Iraq with Andy couldn't be here tonight. They're in Paris, and they wanted me to share a few words from them. Their names are Micah Guerin and Marie-Hélène Carlton. They were there with Philip, and here's what they wrote. We first met Andy in 2003 in Iraq when a small crew of us, including Phil Robertson and James Longley, were staying at the Delamy Hotel, a low-budget hotel in Baghdad and refuge for independent filmmakers and journalists. We shared stories over beer at night by the pool next door. Andy was working on his second film, Blood of My Brother. He was a special kind of filmmaker, and not just for his unique point of view and his filmic voice. He was an OG independent filmmaker, someone who dedicated their life to the practice. When we talk about sharing the voices of people so rarely represented and heard from, he did that with so much respect and empathy for the people he filmed. Andy gave them a voice. And to do that, he gave it everything. At the same time, Andy was very humble, always putting the issues and the people in the film first. We were so glad to see Andy again at the Telluride Film Festival this past summer for James's film premiere. Andy had driven there from California by motorcycle, a warm testament to his independent and adventurous spirit. Andy, we'll miss you, your sweet, kind, funny, unique, talented self, and we celebrate your incredible work and dedication. You will continue to inspire us. With love from Paris, Marie-Helene and Micah.
Thank you, Aaron.
Something that Jay Freund, who edited Incorruptible, wrote about Andy that just really moved me. Andy Berends presented a disarmingly unassuming innocence at first meeting that soon gave way to reveal a young man of enormous intensity and self-deprecating wit, who moved through this life consistently in direct pursuit of the very stuff of it, and all of it, and paid little homage to false gods. All I can offer are my condolences and my belief that the choice that he made at the end of his life, for him, like all his other explorations, was without alternative. His presence will be remembered fondly by all of us bit players.
Thank you. Please come on up and introduce yourself. I can.
Apropos of me and Andy. If we haven't yet met, my name is Brooke Jackson. I did not know Andy on the internet. I knew Andy in the 1970s, 80s, 90s. Grew up together in Hastings, so good to see my Hastings family. We also went to college together at Wesleyan with cousin Ben and our Wesleyan friends. I guess I just wanted to capture that piece. So I'm now a high school principal, and I say to my students, the reason I'm a principal in New York City Public School is to make school suck less. And Andy, really growing up with Andy, made school suck less for me and for a lot of us. I was very achievement-oriented young woman, and Andy was very helpful in my kind of health and wellness and kind of the don't worry, be happy, cricket on my shoulder, and just really validating my sense that art making is the good life, and it'll help me find my inner artist and validate my mind's eye. And he was a model of that, and he was a champion of that, and so many of us. And really just making artistic prowess, doing things. Jan, I loved your words the other night in Hastings, talk about vulnerability, it was so beautiful. But making things like joining the madrigal choir, where there was social prowess. I never would have thought that. But that was one of the best things about growing up in Hastings, being a part of that special group. Again, it's very countercultural, especially if you're growing up in a suburb like Hastings, where the cultural messages are all about kind of profit and wealth and security. And Andy taught so many of us that it was also about vulnerability and caretaking and art making, and it's a countercultural message that kind of courage to take care of those more vulnerable of us is where we should use our gifts and our power. So I'm so grateful to have known Andy and to have loved him. So interesting to hear so many of you say I knew him on the net. I knew him so much in the flesh. Like I've always been very small and round, and Andy was very long and lean, and yet he gave the best hugs, and he was the best cuddler, and we spent many hours in my house with lots of you, with always good food and good movies and good music and whatever weed my parents left around, and beautiful times. So I love you, Freedom, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to come down? Don't be shy. I want to thank you all for coming. Thanks especially to Mike Liss for putting this together, and Aaron Soffin and Mike Pilgrim, to Chai and Isabella for sharing their stories. So go in peace.